Hello YouTube, Mike Kohanam here. Today I'm going to show you my Swordsoul deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and give you a quick guide to running that deck and the strategy behind it. Swordsoul is a very popular deck in Master Duel, arguably one of the most powerful, and normally I prefer to play less popular lower tier decks and reach Diamond 1 with them, but sometimes you just want to play a really strong deck, perfect it, and see how quickly you can get to Diamond 1 with it. And that's what I did this month. I ended last season at Diamond 1, doing the final stretch from Diamond 3 to Diamond 1 using the Swordsoul deck. So I started at Platinum 5 in this season. I got to Diamond rank within 1 day of playing it, and yesterday I hit Diamond 1 4 days into the season, because today is July 5th. So the Swordsoul deck is extraordinarily powerful. So for anybody looking for just a powerful deck to use in Master Duel to climb the ranks, I recommend trying out Swordsoul and following this guide for the basic strategy and understanding of the deck. So this video is just going to be a basic guide to running the deck. I'll go over all of the cards in the deck, what their purpose is in the deck, how they interact with other cards in the deck, the best ways to use certain cards, some of the pitfalls and weaknesses of the deck, and then I'll go through some of the replays that I played, commenting on some of the moves that were made in those duels. So if you're interested in learning Swordsoul or learning how to play against Swordsoul, I think this can be a helpful video. I know that there are a lot of videos out there about Swordsoul because it is such a popular deck, but I think that people playing the deck all have a bit of a different perspective, and you can learn a lot from listening to players who are proficient in the deck, talk about the moves that the deck can make, which moves come up often, and what to avoid doing. If you enjoy this guide, I would really appreciate if you hit the like button on YouTube and subscribe to my channel. Doing that shows me which videos my viewers are interested in and gives me a lot of encouragement to create more videos like it. As you can see, the season began less than a week ago, and I've already hit the top rank of Diamond 1 status with my Swordsoul Tenyi deck. There's nothing particularly special about the deck I used in this season. It's just a powerful, consistent Swordsoul Tenyi deck. So I'll go through the moves, I'll show you the deck I played, and talk about the cards. For those of you interested in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, the Swordsoul deck is also a powerful deck in the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. It has been topping YCS and regional events consistently, although the decks are a little bit different because cards like Archnemeses Protos are forbidden in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, but allowed in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. The general strategy and most of the moves and cards are similar between the two decks, so if you can master the deck in Master Duel, you should be proficient with it in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, and vice versa. So the Swordsoul deck is definitely a good deck to know. There are 3 main Swordsoul effect monsters that you're going to use in your deck to really get your plays going. The strongest of them, in my opinion, is Swordsoul of Mo Ye, although all 3 of them do have different effects that give them different utility throughout a duel. Swordsoul of Mo Ye, though, when you read it, is just generically powerful. On its own, in a vacuum, you can read the card and say, this card's incredible. So it's a level 4 monster that if you normal or special summon it, you can reveal a Swordsoul card or a Worm monster from your hand to special summon a Swordsoul token, which is a level 4 tuner. While you control that token, you can't summon monsters from the extra deck except by Synchro Summon, which is really not a problem for this deck because it's so Synchro Summon oriented. So right off the bat, you summon Swordsoul and reveal a card without even using a second card, and you'll have the materials necessary for a level 8 Synchro Summon. There are so many good level 8 Synchro monsters in the extra deck that this deck uses, which I'll go through later. But not only does Mo Ye then facilitate the level 8 Synchro Summon pretty much on its own, but when you use it in a Synchro Summon as a Synchro material, you also get to draw a card. So it also replaces itself. So as far as your options go, Mo Ye accelerates you tremendously. And as I'll discuss later, the synchro monsters that you can summon using Mo Ye and its Swordsoul token give you even more cards and have incredible effects that can really pin down your opponent's moves. The second of the main Swordsoul monsters in the deck is Swordsoul of Taia. Swordsoul of Taia is similar to Swordsoul of Mo Ye, but appears to be a little bit weaker on its face. Unlike Mo Ye, which requires you to reveal a Swordsoul card or a worm monster from your hand to special summon the token, Swordsoul of Taia requires you to banish a Swordsoul card or a worm monster from your graveyard to special summon that same level 4 tuner Swordsoul token. In addition, unlike Mo Ye, which draws a card when it's used in a synchro summon and sent to the graveyard, Swordsoul of Taia instead sends a Swordsoul card or a worm monster from your deck to the graveyard. In a vacuum, drawing a card is generally more powerful than sending a card of a specific type from your deck to the graveyard, though that is not always the case, and Swordsoul of Taia synergizes very well with the Tenyi monsters in this deck, who have effects that can be used while they're in the graveyard. So Swordsoul of Taia is a nice card, and it's also helpful that you can use the effect even without cards in your hand. So it does come in handy. Most decks do run fewer copies of Taia than Mo Ye. In my deck, I am using 2 copies of Swordsoul of Taia and a full three copies of Swordsoul of Mo Ye, but you definitely do want to use both because they both have their uses, come in handy, and are extremely powerful cards. In addition, Swordsoul of Taia can make the same level 8 synchro monsters that Swordsoul of Mo Ye can, pretty much by itself. The third of the 3 Swordsoul monsters in the main deck is Swordsoul Strategist Longyuan. Longyuan is usually a follow-up to a play involving Mo Ye and or Swordsoul of Taia, because it is a level 6 monster that you can special summon by discarding another Swordsoul card or a worm-type monster from your hand. And unlike Mo Ye and Taia, Longyuan sets up the synchro summon of a level 10 monster like Baron de Fleur. Because when it's special summoned through this effect, you get to special summon that same level 4 Swordsoul token to your field, which is a tuner, which you can instantly tune with Longyuan to make that level 10 monster. In addition, Longyuan's effect lets you inflict 1200 points of damage to your opponent when it's used as a synchro material and sent to the graveyard, which can come in handy when you're trying to defeat your opponent in a single turn. Because, as you'll see later, Baron de Fleur, Chixiao, and the Link monster, Monk of the Tenyi, which has 1000 attack points. The combined attack of those 3 monsters is 6800, which when combined with Longyuan's 1200 points of damage, wipes out all 8000 of an opponent's life points. So while effects that inflict direct damage to the opponent are typically not perceived as too powerful, because they don't really improve your setup in a duel, Longyuan's effect actually comes in handy quite often and helps you hit the finish line when it comes to wiping out your opponent's life points. The next card that I want to talk about is Incredible Ecclesia, the Virtuous. This card's kind of like a wild card for the deck, because although it itself is not a Swordsoul monster, you can tribute it during either player's main phase as a quick effect to special summon a Swordsoul monster or a Fallen of Albaz from your hand or deck. And although Fallen of Albaz is not in this deck, it can get any of the 3 Swordsoul monsters from the deck. You're generally not going for Longyuan because you won't get its token alongside it if you special summon it with Incredible Ecclesia, but even still, using Incredible Ecclesia to get the option of Mo Ye or Taia can be extremely powerful. In addition, if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can special summon it from your hand. So then you can have access to Mo Ye and Taia without even using up a normal summon. It's also a tuner, which can come in handy when you're trying to make a synchro summon or link summon Crystron Halka Fibrax, So Incredible Ecclesia, the Virtuous, has a lot of utility in the deck and helps to bring the strategy together. Just watch out for Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, which can prevent you from being able to special summon a Swordsoul monster from your deck after you tribute your Ecclesia. Adding to the consistency of the deck, we also have Swordsoul Emergence, which very simply adds a Swordsoul monster from your deck to your hand, or if you control a Synchro monster, you can add a Worm type monster to your hand instead of a Swordsoul monster, which is a broader range of monsters that it can reach. Again, this is just another card you use to get the cards you want. It also has an effect that lets you increase or decrease the level of a Worm type monster you control if it's banished from the graveyard, although that really does not come up often in this deck. The final Swordsoul card in the deck is Swordsoul Blackout. This card is kind of like Icarus Attack. If you played Yu-Gi-Oh! Back in the day, you might remember it. Except instead of tributing the monster on your field, it targets a Worm-type monster that you control, as well as 2 cards your opponent controls, and destroys them. In addition, it can special summon a Swordsoul token to the field if it's banished from your graveyard, which does come up once in a while, especially for keeping you in a duel if you need that extra monster on the field. But the real strength of this card is the fact that you can search for it with the effect of the level 8 Swordsoul Grandmaster Chixiao, and the fact that it can just destroy your opponent's cards 2 at a time to help you maintain a stranglehold that you have on the field. So that's it for the Swordsoul cards in the main deck. Now let's talk about the Tenyi cards in the main deck. Those cards are extremely powerful. They're all similar in how they work, but have different effects. Tenyi Spirit, I'll start with Tenyi Spirit Vishuda, who I think is the most straightforward. All of the Tenyi monsters can be special summoned from your hand if you control no effect monsters. So if you have only normal monsters on the field, or if you have no monsters on the field, you can just special summon it from your hand. In addition, since they are all non-linked Tenyi monsters, you can link them away from Monk of the Tenyi, thereby replacing them with a normal monster on your field, so that you can special summon another different Tenyi monster from your hand. In addition, each of the Tenyi monsters have effects that you can activate from your hand or graveyard by banishing them, as long as you control a non-effect monster on your field. You can have effect monsters and non-effect monsters on your field to use the effect that requires you to banish them. But if you have the combination of both on the field, you can't special summon them from your hand. So be sure to keep that in mind when you're making your plays. Vishuda's effect lets you target any card your opponent controls and return it to the hand. So this is great for forcing out the negation of a card like Baronne de Fleur or Chixiao, or even just sending skill drain to your opponent's hand if they're playing Eldritch to get off the effects of your monsters. Tenyi Spirit Ashuna works the same way, except instead of returning a card to your opponent's hand with its effect that can be activated by banishing it, Tenyi Spirit Ashuna will special summon a Tenyi monster from your deck. Special summoning it from your deck will then give you access to its effect if you link it away and send it to the graveyard. Just watch out, because if you use this effect, you won't be able to special summon monsters for the rest of the turn, except for Worm-type monsters. For the most part, that's not really a problem. There's only a couple of non-Worm monsters that you might want to special summon. Halka-Fibrax and Baronne de Fleur comes to mind. But the majority of the strong cards in the deck are in fact Worm-type monsters, like Chixiao, Baxia, Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, and a Swordsoul Supreme Sovereign Cheng. So for the most part, it's not going to be much of an issue. The third and final of the Tenyi monsters that are used in this deck is Tenyi Spirit Adhara. Adhara's effect lets you special summon it from your hand if you control no effect monsters, just like the other Tenyi monsters. But its second effect lets you banish it from your graveyard while you control a non-effect monster in order to add a worm-type monster from your banish zone to your hand. So this is a great card for bringing back your worm-type monsters that you banish with the effects of cards like Swordsoul of Taia or Swordsoul Grandmaster Chixiao. But it's also cool because you can actually use Crossout Designator on your opponent's turn to banish a card that you want to add to your hand with an Adhara that's in your graveyard. So there's some cool combos that you can do with it, and it gives you access to cards that you would otherwise be unable to get back, like Archnemeses Protos. Remember that Vishuda and Adhara do not lock you into only special summoning worm monsters. It's only using the effect of Ashuna that locks you into special summoning only worm monsters for the rest of the turn. Archnemeses Protos is also in my version of the deck. I see people playing this deck without Archnemeses Protos. I don't understand it. This is one of the most powerful cards in the deck. It has single-handedly won me so many duels, especially against Eldritch. Any dark-based deck like Shaddoll Invoked, Archnemeses Protos just completely shuts down single-handedly. And I just don't, I don't see this in every deck, and I don't understand why. But Archnemeses Protos is searchable by Swordsoul Emergence because it's a worm monster if you have a synchro monster on your field. And you can summon it by banishing 3 monsters of varying attributes from your field and graveyard, which is pretty easy to do because the attributes in this deck are totally spread out. While it's on the field, you can declare an attribute, a monster that is on the field, and destroy all monsters on the field of that attribute, and prevent players from special summoning monsters of that attribute until your next turn. So it really locks down your opponent if they're playing monsters of a single attribute, and it takes care of the threats that they have already summoned to the field. Archnemeses Protos also can't be destroyed by card effects, including its own card effect, so you can always call Dark with its effect to just stop your opponent from special summoning dark monsters, even if there's nothing else on the field, and Dark happens to be one of the most popular attributes. The final main strategy that I want to talk about in the deck is the Crystron Halqifibrax engine, which is enabled just by playing a single copy of Deskbot 001. The way it works is you can summon Halqifibrax by combining any two monsters, at least one of which is a tuner. Generally, you're going to want to combine Adhara, who's a level 1 tuner, with a Monk of the Tenyi that you link summoned by sending either Vishuda or Ashuna to the graveyard. Once you link summon Halqifibrax, its effect will special summon Deskbot 001 from your hand or deck. Since they're both machines, you can link them together into Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon, whose effect special summons 3 level 3 machine tokens to your field. Since they're all summoned at the same time, Deskbot 001's effect will activate, and you'll be able to special summon it back from their graveyard, even though you just used it in a link summon. Deskbot 001 is a level 1 tuner, so you'll then have on the field Auroradon, along with the Deskbot 001 and the 3 Mecha Phantom Beast tokens, which are all level 3 non-tuners. That means that you can either synchro summon a level 10 monster like Baron de Fleur or a Swordsoul Supreme Sovereign Changying without ever using a normal summon. You can also synchro summon Yazi, Evil of the Yang Zing, which admittedly does not come up often in my experience, but whose effect can destroy cards on the field and give you access to worm-type monsters you may wish you had that you didn't draw, like, for example, Mo Ye or Swordsoul of Taia. This whole engine only takes up a single slot in the main deck and 2 slots in the extra deck, and it's incredibly powerful, so I think it's worth playing. The rest of the cards in the deck are more generic. Harpie's Feather Duster is there to help deal with Eldritch decks and other heavy back row decks. 3 copies of Maxx and 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring are in pretty much every deck I built just because they're so generically powerful. Call by the Grave and Crossout Designator will help you push through your plays. Infinite Impermanence is there as well to stop the opponent and add to some of the variety in the deck, so that Crossout Designator has more cards that it's able to negate. The 2 copies of Nibiru are for stopping other combo decks. It's not particularly powerful against Swordsoul because in many instances you can actually summon Baron de Fleur within your 5 summons, so that if they have Nibiru, you're able to negate it. But I did run into a lot of virtual world decks as well, which led me to throw in a second copy of Nibiru. And then finally, Pot of Desires, which is a strong card in general, but it's even stronger in this deck because you have Swordsoul Supreme Sovereign Cheng Ying, who gets 100 attack and defense points for every one of those cards that you banish, and weakens the opponent's cards by 100 for every one of those cards you banish. In addition, it has an effect that anytime a card's banished, activates, and it lets you banish a card from your opponent's field and graveyard. So there's a nice synergy there between Pot of Desires and Cheng Ying. And Pot of Desires is also just a strong card on its own. So that covers everything in the main deck. I'll talk about the extra deck next, and then go through some replays to see the deck in action. First, let's go through the level 8 Synchro Monsters. They're all a little different, so they all have their utility. The most common one that you're going to summon is Swordsoul Grandmaster Chixiao, because it can negate an opponent's monster's effect as a quick effect by banishing a Swordsoul card from your graveyard, or a worm-type monster from your graveyard, or hand if you want to. But even more importantly is it can search your deck for a Swordsoul card when you Synchro Summon it, which will generally set up a play for Longyuan, which allows you to very quickly snowball into the level 10 Synchro Monster as well, or get Swordsoul Emergence to set up a play involving Archnemeses Protos. So Grandmaster Chixiao is one of the focal cards in the deck. Other level 8 Synchro Monsters that you go into include Baxia, Brightness of the Yang Zing. I have 2 copies in here. I've never summoned 2 copies in a single duel. I'm generally not summoning 2 copies. I rarely even summon 1. Sometimes you summon 1 because it's able to shuffle cards into your opponent's deck from their field, which circumvents certain protections. And it can also destroy cards on the field, on your field, to special summon a replacement from your graveyard. So Baxia is a strong card. If I had a second copy of Baron de Fleur, I think I would drop the second Baxia for a second copy of Baron de Fleur, because I have, in instances, wished I had a second Baron de Fleur in the extra deck, but I actually only have 1 copy of Baron de Fleur, so I didn't think it was worth crafting, considering how well the deck was doing and how quickly I hit Diamond 1 without having that second Baron de Fleur. But Baxia is the second card. It is also a worm-type monster, like Chixiao, so it works even if you've used Ashuna's effect, you're still able to summon it. Next up is Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, who is also a worm-type monster. This guy doesn't come up often, but when it comes up, it's awesome. Because its first effect lets you just banish a monster that activates its effect. And it doesn't matter where that monster is. So if your opponent tries to bring the Golden Lord back from the graveyard by using its effect to send a spell or trap to the graveyard, Draco Berserker of the Tenyi can actually banish it before it's returned to the hand and able to special summon itself. Its other effect might be even stronger though, and that's typically when you want to summon it. If it destroys an effect monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, it actually gains attack points equal to that monster's attack, and can attack again into another monster. So this is kind of a finisher. If your opponent has 2 monsters on the field, especially if one of them is powerful with close to 3,000 attack points, but less than 3,000 attack points, keep your mind on Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, because it can end a duel with its 2 attacks, and its second attack having over 5,000 attack points. Another thing worth mentioning is that Shaman of the Tenyi, which is a Link 2 monster in the extra deck that you can make with 2 worm-type monsters, locks you into only using the effects of monsters special summoned from the extra deck if they're Tenyi monsters. You can use Shaman of the Tenyi's effect and still use the effect of Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, because it's the only Tenyi monster in your extra deck. So those are the level 8 worm type monsters. The other 2 level 8 monsters in the extra deck are Crimson Blader, which this is another card where it's kind of just when you need to summon it, you know you need to summon it. It's kind of hard to explain, but like if you don't have a way to immediately win against Virtual World, but you can summon Crimson Blader and destroy one of their monsters, preventing them from making their level 9 monsters, usually that's going to be a path to victory. I mostly found Crimson Blader coming up against Virtual World, but I'm sure there are other decks that you'll encounter where it's also powerful. But if it destroys an opponent's monster at battle and sends it to the graveyard, your opponent can't summon any level 5 or higher monsters during their next turn. If your opponent's deck is solely Link summon based, if the entire strategy is around Link summons, Crimson Blader doesn't do anything. But against decks like Swordsoul Tenyi, or where I found it to come up most often is against Virtual World, your opponent really can't do anything because most of their strategy involves level 5 and higher monsters. The last level 8 monster in the extra deck is Adamancipator Risen Dragite. This card's pretty cool because if you have a water monster in your graveyard, it can negate a spell or a trap card each turn. I summon this thing kind of often against Eldritch. Swordsoul of Mo Ye is a water type monster, so you'll have that in your graveyard more often than not. Halqifibrax is also a water type water attribute, sorry, not water type. Water attribute monster that enables Dragite's effect. And Swordsoul of Taia, when using a synchro summon, can send Mo Ye, which is a water monster, to the graveyard. So turning on Dragite's negation effect is pretty easy. It also has a pretty cool effect that lets you excavate the top 5 cards of your deck and return cards to your opponent's hand equal to the number of rock monsters you revealed. There actually are rock monsters in the deck because there's 2 copies of Nibiru. So it's not really a likely shot that you'll be able to return your opponent's cards to your hand, but it's not impossible, so it's worth mentioning. The level 7 Yazi, you can summon typically by using 2 Mecha Phantom Beast tokens that you summon off of Auroradon, the Link monster, and tuning that with the level 1 Deskbot 001. Again, this really does not come up often in my experience dueling with Swordsoul, but it's an option if you think you need it. The level 10s are strong options as well. I've mentioned Baron de Fleur earlier as your go-to level 10 in most instances. It's so powerful because it can just destroy a card on the field once per turn, and once while it's face up on the field can negate any activation and destroy the card that activated it. So it is an Omni negate, as most players call it, once while it's face up on the field. During your standby phase, you can also exchange it with a level 9 or lower monster in your graveyard by shuffling it into the Baron de Fleur into your extra deck. This doesn't come up that often, but it comes up often enough that it's relevant to mention, because once you've depleted the negation of Baron de Fleur, if it's still on the field, you may want to swap it with a monster like Chixiao that's in your graveyard. If your opponent destroyed the Chixiao but not the Baron de Fleur over the course of their turn. Monk of the Tenyi I mentioned earlier. It's really there as a way to get the Tenyi spirit monsters off of the field and replace them with normal monsters that allow you to use the Tenyi monsters' effects if you don't have Swordsoul tokens out. And I talked about the Halqifibrax and Auroradon combo that the Deskbot 001 is in the main deck to facilitate. Auroradon, in addition to giving you the tokens, so that you can synchro summon strong monsters, also has effects that let you destroy a card on the field by tributing 1 monster, and it could be itself, without targeting, which can come in handy and is powerful. And if you tribute 3 monsters, you can add a trap card from your graveyard to your hand, which could get the Swordsoul Blackout yet, although, to be honest, in my journey to Diamond 1, that has never come up. The second effect of Auroradon, which lets you tribute 2 monsters to special summon a Mecha Phantom Beast from your deck, is totally irrelevant in this deck because there is not a single Mecha Phantom Beast in this deck. Just in case you're considering playing this deck or a similar deck in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon is forbidden, so you cannot use this combo. So that should explain everything you really need to know to play the Swordsoul Tenyi deck well. If you found it to be helpful, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel and like this video. Without further ado, I'll go into some of the replays of the duels that I won on my way to Diamond 1 and explain what's going on in them and the plays that I made. So I always choose to go first with this deck. It's not awful going second because you do play a lot of cards that can disrupt your opponent, like Maxx, Ash Blossom, Nibiru, Infinite Impermanence, and stuff like that. Plus, you have a lot of disruption through the Tenyi cards when it finally does come to your turn, but going first is still preferred. So I started off this duel with Swordsoul of Mo Ye, which lets me reveal the Emergence to summon the token and synchro summon Chixiao. Chixiao's effect and Mo Ye's effect let me draw a card and then add a Swordsoul monster to my hand. I search for the Strategist, Longyuan, and draw Archnemeses Protos. I special summon Longyuan, and my opponent uses Nibiru to clear my field and replace it with a token. I use Pot of Desires, and since I do have only a non-effect monster on the field, I'm able to special summon Adhara, which is a tuner, and now I can go into the Crystron Halka Fibrax combo. I was fortunate to have not banished the Deskbot 001 with Pot of Desires, so I use Adhara and the Nibiru token to link summon Auroradon, use its effect to special summon 3 Mecha Phantom Beast tokens, and then special summon Deskbot 001 from my graveyard. That lets me synchro summon a level 10 monster, so I go for Baronne de Fleur. And next, I do summon Archnemeses Protos by banishing 3 monsters from my grave. And I declare Light as an attribute to destroy his Nibiru and stop him from special summoning light monsters. He unfortunately does have a Kaiju to get rid of my monster. He's able to special summon his own, or take it back using Owner's Seal, and then give me another Kaiju. He destroys the Auroradon, but this deck has so much resilience, so I just use Mo Ye to set up Chixiao once again, and I again have Longyuan, which I'm able to use. By discarding Longyuan, I special summon it, and I summon Cheng Ying, who has 4,300 attack points because it's so boosted by the Pot of Desires I used. He uses Swift Scarecrow here to sort of prolong his inevitable defeat. He does use Lightning Storm, which destroys all the monsters on my field except for Swordsoul Supreme Sovereign Cheng Ying, because it can protect itself from destruction just by banishing a card from the graveyard. He survives the battle phase with Battle Fader. He then gives me Gamma Seal and uses Relinquished Anima to absorb it. But this whole duel, I'm so far ahead, I never really think much of it. I special summon Ashuna, link it into Monk of the Tenyi so I can use Adhara's effect, bring back the banished Swordsoul of Mo Ye, which was banished by Archnemeses Protos, and I'm set up to win once more. Throughout this duel, it was really a question of when I would win, not if I would win. So I'm not sure that all my plays were optimal. He's kind of just stalling to survive, but he's so out-carded, there's virtually no chance that he would win. I finally get to black out his remaining cards, and now there's nothing that can protect him. He does have the Gizmek Orocho in his graveyard, which he could potentially attempt to use to survive, but I do synchro summon the Berserker Draco of Tenyi, so that if he uses its effect, I am able to banish it from the duel. So the second duel is a heavy Tenyi opening with no Swordsoul cards whatsoever, which is not bad going second. So he uses Pot of Desires, and it looks like he's playing a Tri-Brigade deck, which this deck generally does have a good matchup against. Generally speaking, I'd say the Swordsoul deck is just a lot more powerful. So he gets an okay opening using Fractal to send Kit, and then send Nerval to the graveyard to get his search. He summons Kit, banishes 2 cards. I use Maxx, and he has the Ash Blossom for the Maxx, so he's able to continue his turn unimpeded. He goes for the Bear Brum. That's going to give him access to his Tri-Brigade Revolt if he wants it when he links it away, which he does. He makes Appaloosa, which can negate monster effects, sets 2 cards to his back row. And then I fortunately do have Harpie's Feather Duster, so he can use the Revolt, but by forcing it out, he's not able to use it at an optimal time to banish a relevant card with Shureg. Appaloosa has 3 effect negations, which is not bad. But the Tenyi monsters stay in my hand because the Appaloosa doesn't destroy them. So I just use all 3 Tenyi monster effects, and he negates all 3 of them. So that leaves me free to summon Longyuan, and leaves all of the Tenyi monsters in my hand. Longyuan summons the Swordsoul token to link summon Baronne de Fleur. Baronne de Fleur destroys Shureg with its effect, and I'm able to attack over Appaloosa for 3,000 points of damage. He's down on cards, and Baronne de Fleur is still able to negate the activation of anything, so my opponent concedes. On to the next replay. I start with a rough hand that really can't do much. Fortunately, I am going second because this hand seems to be even worse going first. I fire off the Pot of Desires, which is really no help. He has 3 cards in his back row. I blindly set the Imperm against one of them, same column as one of them. He uses Altergeist Protocol and Personal Spoofing, so it does appear to be an Altergeist deck. He used the effect of Multi-Faker, which finally gives me an opportunity to use Maxx, which lets me special summon 2 cards. I use the second Pot of Desires because I really feel like I need to apply pressure here, and I special summon Ecclesia, using its effect to summon Mo Ye. He uses the Infinite Impermanence to negate Mo Ye's effect, but with it finally on the field, I finally have some plays I can make. So I use the Imperm to target the Sulquidus, which negates the Protocol. Then special summon Protos, selecting Dark, so he can't special summon Dark monsters, which can be problematic for his deck. And I do score a direct attack with the Protos. He does use Personal Spoofing to send a card back. He grabs Meluseek, which can attack directly and send one of my cards to the graveyard. He gets rid of the Protos. He link summons Magistus Moon. I do use Call by the Grave on the Meluseek to stop him from searching. He uses Personal Spoofing to trade for another Multi-Faker. I normal summon Taia, banish the Emergence. He selects Synchro Monster with Dimensional Barrier, so I can't Synchro Summon. Using it also lets him use Multi-Faker. So I again use Maxx to draw 2 cards when Multi-Faker and Sulquidus come out. I use Feather Duster, which I'm fortunate enough to draw, which is a huge hindrance to an Altergeist deck. I'm low on cards with only 2 cards in my deck, but I do have a commanding advantage here. That's the double-edged sword of Pot of Desires. He summons Marionetter. I banish the Archnemeses Protos from my graveyard to summon a Swordsoul token. He bounces the token, so I'm not able to do much with it. I normal summon the Maxx, not thinking I'll get any better use out of it. I use Shaman of the Tenyi to summon Mo Ye from the grave, and then Mo Ye's effect to special summon Dragite. So now I have the negation of a spell or trap on my opponent's turn. Shaman of the Tenyi stops me from using Dragite's effect on my own turn, but by the time it's his turn, it can again negate a spell or a trap card, which is extremely relevant here. So he gets the protocol. I destroy the Marionetter and the protocol instantly. He sets a back row, which is a card that I can negate with the Dragite. And with 0 cards left in my deck, it looks like I'm going to deal the finishing blow. Just to be sure, I do banish Adhara from my grave after making Monk of the Tenyi, so I could return the Archnemeses Protos that I summoned before. I declare Earth to stop him from using the Altergeist monster he had in his hand that he could otherwise special summon to stop my attack, just to guarantee that I win with the no cards in my deck, and with no deck, I do secure the victory. There were some long duels in there. I think a lot of them are, from here on out, are actually a lot shorter in time. Fewer turns. This is the first of the replays from when I finally hit Diamond rank. Took me about a day to hit Diamond rank. This is a pretty standard opening. You're going to use Mo Ye, use its effect to special summon a token, summon Chixiao, get your search, then summon Longyuan, and make Baron de Fleur. When you can, you want to make Baron de Fleur before Chixiao, simply because you can then summon Baron de Fleur in under 5 summons, protecting you from Nibiru. I'm able to follow up with Archnemeses Protos as well here. He goes into Borbo, he stacks up into Zeus with 4 materials. He uses Zeus' effect once. I chain Baron de Fleur to negate. He chains Zeus' effect a second time, and I use Chixiao to negate. It's pretty tough to play through those 2 negations, as my opponent learned here. He uses Keras, special summons it by discarding Nerval. I just use Cold by the Grave to banish it, and he really has nothing. He can't even summon Shureg because Protos prevented the special summoning of all dark attribute monsters. My opponent has a T set, which typically is not very good. My hand is unfortunately very weak, though. He uses the effect of Shadal Hedgehog after flip summoning it, and just scores attacks with Hedgehog and Squamata. This is an unusually weak hand. He uses the El Shadal Fusion to summon Construct. I get a draw off of Maxx, which could be helpful. He does summon the Construct. He targets the Call by the Grave with Dragon's effect. I chain it. He link summons the Anaconda, and you can tell that Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer is coming. Archnemeses Protos is in my hand, which is particularly powerful against Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer because it can't be destroyed by its effect and can lock your opponent out of special summoning dark monsters during their next turn, shutting down its resurrection effect. So I special summon Ecclesia, and when he chains the Schism, I chain the effect of the Ecclesia before he can summon Winda to get the light monster in the grave. I don't use the effect of the Mo Ye I summon. I just wanted the extra attribute so that I'm able to special summon Protos, which I'm able to declare Dark Attribute with to get rid of all the dark monsters. And more importantly, stop him from summoning them. In main phase 2, I am able to summon Baron de Fleur after Winda's destroyed, and that puts me in such a dominating position that the duel is pretty much over. He used the effect of Schism, but Burrow on the Floor negates its activation. I actually forgot here that he couldn't special summon Dark Monsters during my turn either, so I could have actually attacked and let him use the effect that would have special summoned because there were no non-Dark Monsters for him to special summon with his flip effect. So there was a slight misplay on my part in this duel, which I did want to point out. But again, it really highlights the power of Archnemeses Protos, because this duel was really won on the back of Archnemeses Protos. So in this duel, I get to go first and have a fairly strong hand. I start by special summoning Ashuna while I have a clear field and link it away into Monk of the Tenyi. That lets me special summon Adhara from my hand, so I have a tuner and a non-tuner on the field and can link summon Crystron Halka Fibrax. This is ultimately going to get me into Baron de Fleur without ever using a normal summon. It's nice to do because if they're basically forced to use the Nibiru if they have it before Baron de Fleur comes out, and once they do, you're free to use do all the other plays you would have otherwise made had you not been able to make those special summons without fear of Nibiru. So that's what happens here after the 001 Deskbot comes out. He uses the Nibiru before I can summon Baron de Fleur, and now I can summon Swordsoul of Mo Ye and do all of the other plays that I would otherwise want to do. So I use Mo Ye to special summon a token, synchro summon Chixiao, use Chixiao and Mo Ye's effects. I generally make Chixiao Chainlink 1 and Mo Ye Chainlink 2 so that the opponent can't use Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring against Chixiao. It's effectively chain blocked, so if they use the Ash Blossom, it'll stop Mo Ye instead. I do get to draw a card, and I get to search for a Longyuan. I use Longyuan's effect to special summon it, which allows me to synchro summon Baron de Fleur, and then I use Archnemeses Protos to further lock down my opponent by declaring the Dark attribute, and I set Swordsoul Blackout so I can also threaten 2 cards on the field. So that was a really strong start, and there's just not much my opponent can do against all these negations. He does summon Lulu and attack the token. I use Swordsoul Blackout to just destroy his back rows. And once again, my field's incredible. I use Baron de Fleur to just destroy his single monster, and attacks from my remaining monsters wipe out the rest of his life points. So that duel was a good display of the power of the Halka Fibrax package, which basically lets you build a field without committing to a normal summon. So my opponent sets 4 back rows and uses Lord of the Heavenly Prison, so I can't destroy any of those back rows. I start with Mo Ye, and he apparently has no real good answer to it because he pays half of his life points with Solemn Judgment to negate it. He summons the Lord of the Heavenly Prison. Against this deck, you're not getting much better use out of Maxx, so I chain it. I assume he's playing Eldritch. Once summoned, he's able to set Fusion Destiny to his back row with the effect of Lord of Heavenly Prison and banish it during his next turn. But with Lord of the Heavenly Prison on the field, I'm able to special summon Ecclesia, tribute it to special summon Mo Ye from my deck, which he used a Solemn Judgment on before, so its effect has not yet activated. And then I synchro summon the Adamancipator Risen Dragite, which can negate a spell or a trap card. He uses Imperial Order against my Swordsoul Emergence that I follow up with, but I do negate the Imperial Order with Dragite because from the Solemn Judgment on the Mo Ye at the very start, I certainly sense desperation. I special summon Protos next, declaring Dark, which also stops him from playing the Fusion Destiny he just set. And I was hoping to win the duel right there and just end it, but he does have the Elixir to special summon Eldritch the Golden Lord and survive. But I'm still in good shape because on the next turn, Dragite can negate another one of his cards, and he can't even activate the Fusion Destiny because it would special summon a Dark Monster. So he just ends his turn hiding behind the Golden Lord. The Fusion Destiny is banished by the effect of Lord of Heavenly Prison. He uses the Conquistador of the Golden Land to try to destroy one of my monsters. I try to negate with Dragite. He chains Skill Drain, dropping to 3,000 life points to negate my effect. And it does indeed get destroyed, the Dragite, by the Conquistador. I normal summon Adhara, link it away to summon Monk of the Tenyi, and that lets me use Vishuda, as well as the effect of the Adhara in my grave. So I use Adhara's effect in the graveyard to return Mo Ye to my hand. Then I banish Vishuda from my hand, because the Tenyi monsters have effects that can be used from the hand as well when there's a normal monster on the field, and I return Skill Drain to his hand. And that's enough to make him concede. Start this duel off with Pot of Desires because I otherwise don't have much of a play, but that does get me Longyuan, so I pick Ashuna to special summon Longyuan. He uses Maxx, which I remember reluctantly chaining Called by the Grave to. I really didn't have a choice, but remember that if you use Called by the Grave on a card, that card's effects are also negated during the following turn, so right now the Maxx in my hand is completely useless. So I special summon the Longyuan. Special summon, synchro summon Baron de Fleur with the token that it generates and inflict 1,200 points of damage, and I just end my turn with Baron de Fleur. I do have Nibiru in my hand, but remember, I can't use the Maxx. He uses Pot of Extravagance, so it turns out that this probably is not a deck that Maxx is particularly effective against, so that works out. And I do negate the Extravagance with the Baron de Fleur, since it does negate does draw 2 cards, and that's generally worth negating. He uses the Hidden City to get Guru, and then you use the effect of Lord of Heavenly Prisons, because he flipped the Hidden City. Summons the Guru. The Lord of Heavenly Prison destroys my monster, taking itself down, and Guru attacks directly. He sets 2 back rows, and play passes back to me. I summon Archnemeses Protos. He uses Final Battle to make it so that his effects can't be negated. He flips both of us face down with the Subterror card face up on the field. But I do summon Taia. This is where Taia is better than Mo Ye because I had no worm in my hand, but Taia is able to use its effect. And I synchro summon Baxia. If you use Taia, which is Wind, to special summon a Swordsoul token, which is a water attribute, you can shuffle 2 of your opponent's cards back into the deck. Remember that Mo Ye is water, as is the Swordsoul token, so if you use Mo Ye and a token to summon Baxia, you can only shuffle 1 of the opponent's cards into the deck. Baxia shuffles in both the Final Battle and the Guru into my opponent's deck, and after he draws a card with Guru gone, he just concedes. So that was a duel where Baxia really came in handy, and it was a nice display of how impactful Baxia can be. I got to go first in this duel. I started off with Pot of Desires. Sometimes I do like to start with Pot of Desires if I'm particularly vulnerable to Ash and Maxx to hopefully draw answers to them. So I draw Incredible Ecclesia. I summon Incredible Ecclesia. I don't use the effect. I can use it during the opponent's turn, but I'm really not ready to commit to play a string of plays that let him draw a bunch of cards with Maxx, which he gained to the Pot of Desires. So I'm happy just leaving Ecclesia in attack position and setting the Infinite Impermanence. He uses Vishuda to return the imperm to my hand. While after summoning Monk of the Tenyi, uses the Emergence to get Taia, summons Taia, and banishes a card from the grave. This is where it got interesting. I chain to the effect of Taia, tributing the Ecclesia. He uses the Crossout Designator to banish the Ecclesia from his deck to stop my Ecclesia, which worked out really well for me because he no longer had the Crossout Designator after that. And I chained the Infinite Impermanence to negate the effect of Taia, completely shutting down the string of plays that would have followed. Had he held the Crossout Designator to stop the Infinite Impermanence, I would have probably lost this duel. So he sets a back row. I use my Feather Duster to just get rid of it. It's an Infinite Impermanence. He may not have had another in his deck for Crossout Designator. I don't know, so that may not have been good anyway. But I summon Ashuna. I let him draw the card with Maxx because I have no other choice. I summon Taia, and I destroy the Monk of the Tenyi and trade Taias with him, trying to leave him with as few cards as possible. Again, I'm not ready to take the Maxx challenge and let him draw a bunch of cards because I'm not confident I can wipe him out. He drew and passed, so that worked out well for me. It certainly paid off that I did not let him draw cards with Maxx. I summon Mo Ye, special summon a token, and then I use Longyuan's effect to special summon it with another token. And I synchro summon Baronne de Fleur next. And the reason I did it in that order is because I wanted Baronne de Fleur to come out as the 5th or fewer summon so that I can negate Nibiru, and I'm not vulnerable to Nibiru. After making Baronne de Fleur, I synchro summon Chixiao, and he concedes because he does not have enough life points left to survive. Here is the 10th and final replay. You're only allowed to save 10 replays at a time, so I did have a lot of other really cool duels, but I kept deleting ones that I had saved for ones that I thought would be a better display of the deck. I once again got to go first. I summon Ashuna from my hand, use Swordsoul Emergence. He plays Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. I use Cold by the Grave to stop the Ash Blossom. I remember really considering whether it was worth using Cold by the Grave because my hand is so vulnerable to other monster effects that he may have in his hand. But ultimately I wanted to get the Mo Ye here, so I did. I normal summoned it, used its effect to special summon the Swordsoul token, synchro summon Chixiao, chain link 1 Chixiao, chain link 2 Mo Ye, so I draw a card and then search with Chixiao's effect. The search gets me Longyuan. I special summon Longyuan, special summon a token alongside it, and then synchro summon Baronne de Fleur. It's very common that you're able to special summon Chixiao and Baronne de Fleur on your first turn. My opponent's playing Salamangreat here, and I remember this being a great Salamangreat duel. So he gets Spinny and activates the Salamangreat Sanctuary. He link summons Balinx, and then special summons Gazelle. He special summons Spinny to the field. I remember I had to be very careful about how I was going to navigate the negations that I had. He summons Mirage Stalio, and at that point I decide to use Baronne de Fleur because it takes out the Xyz monster and sends it to the graveyard. He uses Jack Jaguar next, special summoning to the field by returning Mirage Stalio to his extra deck, and that lets him link summon the Sunlight Wolf, Salamangreat Sunlight Wolf. Well, he plays Will of the Salamangreat, which is insanely good. Then he uses the Sanctuary to trade his Sunlight Wolf for a new Sunlight Wolf, which has its empowered effect. Then he uses Will of the Salamangreat. By sending it to the grave, he gets to special summon 2 monsters since he has a Link 2 monster on the field. And he returns this Will of Salamangreat to his hand, but he can only activate 1 per turn, so I'm not particularly concerned about it at this point. He link summons Splash Mage next. Returns the Gazelle to his hand, using the Sunlight Wolf's effect. Special summons a Jaguar. Performs another Link summon, this time for Transcode Talker. Special summons Sunlight Wolf back from the graveyard. And here he Link summons Access Code Talker. At this point, it's very important to put your toggle on because you can't respond to Access Code Talker's effect. So once the first effect resolves, increasing its attack points, you want to be able to use Chixiao's effect, not in response to an effect, but after the effect has already resolved, to negate its effect so it can't destroy your cards. He uses Salamangreat Roar. He actually can't destroy any of my cards in battle. He uses Salamangreat Roar on my turn to clear my field of 2 of the monsters. I summon Taia, use its effect to summon a token, and that sets me up to Synchro Summon Draco Berserker of the Tenyi. Taia's effect sends Vishuda to the graveyard. I attack Access Code Talker, gaining its attack points. I then attack the Sunlight Wolf and uses Bell Links to protect it. And I attack with Baron de Fleur, dropping him down to 1400. I want to pause here because I made a slight misplay. In my graveyard, I had the Ashuna. I could have used its effect while I had this Swordsoul token on the field that I summoned by Taia to special summon something like Vishuda from my deck in attack position, which would have been enough to finish off the rest of his life points. The reason I made that mistake is because I forgot that he had the Balinks in his graveyard, which he would use to protect the Sunlight Wolf. So that absorbed 1800 more of the damage. I thought I was going to win at that point in time. And that misplay almost cost me because it gave him another turn. And he almost mounted a comeback on that turn. Draco Berserker the Tenyi permanently keeps the attack points it gets after it destroys a monster in battle. So now he has to deal with it having 5300 attack points. So that's just another strong point of Draco Berserker the Tenyi. He uses the Falco. I use Called by the Grave to stop it. He has the Gazelle out. He summons another Balinks. Jaguar comes back. Well, he tries to bring Jaguar back. And Draco Berserker the Tenyi's effect activates to banish it from the duel. Again, this is a nice thing about Draco Berserker the Tenyi. Even though it doesn't negate monster effects, it banishes the monsters that use them, which sometimes effectively negates the effect. As if it's a monster coming back from the graveyard, banishing it from the duel stops it from coming back from the graveyard. So he uses Will of Salamangreat to special summon a monster, makes Sunlight Wolf, uses the Sanctuary to trade it for another Sunlight Wolf with its extra effects. That gets the Roar back from the graveyard, so he can now destroy my 2 monsters. So I used the Will later, he didn't need it before. I suspect the face down card is Roar. He uses Maxx. I top deck Crossout Designator, which was nice. So I just use it, banish Maxx. I presume the face down card is Roar. In my standby phase, I activate the effect of Baron, since the destruction is not particularly powerful in this instance. And Mo Ye is stronger in that instance. But he chains the Roar to destroy Baron along with my other monster, leaving me at no field. Fortunately, I have Adhara in my hand, which I special summon. I link it away to summon Monk of the Tenyi, which lets me then use Adhara's effect to bring Swordsoul of Taia back to my hand. I summon the Taia with no cards in my hand, banish a Swordsoul from my graveyard to summon a token, and then I make a level 8 Synchro monster. I go for the Baxia here, which can shuffle both Sunlight Wolves into the extra deck, and he can't protect them with the Balinks in his graveyard, so I win the duel there. So that's the Swordsoul deck that I used to hit Diamond 1 rank within 4 days this month. The deck is very powerful, and if the TCG is any indication, it's likely to remain powerful even after new cards are released in Master Duel, unless there's some significant change on the Forbidden and Limited list. If you enjoyed this video, if you found the guide to be helpful, I would really appreciate if you like this video and subscribe to my channel. And let me know if you prefer videos on meta decks and how to use them, or some of the less popular decks that players aren't really playing competitively, like Gladiator Beasts and Cyber Dragons. If you can let me know that in the comments, I'll know what sort of content is preferred and where to shift my focus. Thank you.